地を踏みしめて君は目覚めてゆく天使の微笑みで連れ出して孤独でも一人じゃないさ生まれてきたことに必ず意味がある You can smile again 太陽浴びて You can fly away 世界は君の輝きを待ってる大地を踏みしめて君は目覚めてゆく天使の微笑みで連れ出して始まりはいつでも遅くないさ何度でも立ち上が
れ Episode 12 of the MultiMangaverse. 5 or so months later, but here we are. I'm Alan, hoping that you're doing well whenever you're listening to this, wherever you may be in the world right now, hoping that things have been okay in the meantime while I was offline dealing with my own little shenanigans here. But we're finally back with the MultiMangaverse with the 12th episode, as I was saying. So I hope you've been anticipating this one. We'll be taking a look at volume 6 of Hunter x Hunter. Now, before we get started, first of all, how does this sound compared to the usual sound of our previous episodes? I'm hoping this at least sounds slightly better, because this time around I'm not using the not so smartphone. No, this time around I've got some cans on my head, some fancy headphones that I received as a gift from a relative recently. She was heading out of the country on business, and she asked if she could get me anything from a trip, and I just thought, okay, this might be a good chance. So I asked, please, if you get the chance to move around town, please just visit one of the shops and would you please get me a microphone. And she found microphones, but they were a tad expensive, so she thought it would be worthwhile just to get a twin one in the form of headphones with a microphone attached. And so that's what we'll be using now. That's the good news. The bad news, because there's always bad news. The bad news is if there's no power, obviously won't be able to use the microphone, the headphones. So in those occasions, I'll switch back to recording on the phone. So at least now you know, when you hear a future episode where I'm back on the phone, you'll know why. But for every other day when there is power, we'll put on the cans. So let's see how this goes. I'm still trying to get used to it. I think I spent almost half the morning trying to make sure it's connected onto the laptop properly and recording. I'm just glad I didn't require, having to go online and check a few YouTube videos on how to install, how to use the headphones and so on. No extra software required. It's just plug in and just do a little sound test and make sure that you can hear everything. So far so good. Although I'm not going to be using them for gaming or anything, because my PC gaming days those are long gone. You'd have to go back all the way to the 2000s for that. So this is what we'll be using them for so far. So let's finally get into this episode. Like I was saying, we're looking at volume 6 of Hunter x Hunter, special volume, because this is the volume which contains chapter 50 of Hunter x Hunter. And if you're someone who has followed Weekly Shonen Jump for a while, you'll be aware that when manga reach milestones, like the 50th chapter, for example, they make a big deal about it. Usually they are on the cover of the issue of that magazine of that particular week. They get color pages as well. So that was the case for Hunter x Hunter at the time. And I just thought it would be a good idea just to go online and have a look at that particular issue of Jump and see what was going on at the time. So towards the end of the episode, we'll dive back and have a look at that particular issue of Jump and see which other titles were running at the time. So let's begin. Volume 6 of Hunter x Hunter. It was first released on the 4th of October 1999 by Shueisha in Japan, and then on the 3rd of January 2006 in English by Viz Media. It contains chapters 45 to 54, and we continue the Heaven's Arena story arc, which began in the previous volume, chapter 44. So let's begin now. Chapter 45, Ren. So the chapter opens with information about the tower, Heaven's Arena, a multi-floor tower that serves as a hub for combat enthusiasts, both fans and participants, and it attracts at least 4,000 fighters every day who are aiming to test themselves and show off their skills. The best ones, of course, they can take over an entire floor by themselves, and each year there are 1 billion fans who make their way to the Heaven's Arena to watch the action. And so to accommodate this large influx of fans, there are several facilities that are now available inside the tower, including restaurants and shops. So from there we see our two heroes, Gon and Killua. They are accompanied to an elevator by a female official who explains that the tower is made up of 20 divisions, and each division contains 10 floors, and this goes all the way up to 200 floors. A fighter who succeeds in winning a match on the 50th floor can move up to the 60th floor, but if they lose a match, the fighter moves back down to the 40th floor. This is where Killua, he turns to Gon and he tells him that if they reach the 100th floor, they'll be granted their own rooms on that floor. So in this same elevator that the boys are in, they find the other boy who is making his way to the 50th floor. This boy, we saw him at the end of the previous chapter, who is wearing a white karate gi, and once the elevator arrives on the 50th floor and the boys step out, this boy, he introduces himself to Gon and Killua. The first thing he does, he bows to them and he gives this phrase, Osu, and he introduces himself as Zushi. And Gon and Killua, they introduce themselves to Zushi, and Zushi, he praises them for their fighting skills, having watched their matches. And Killua admits that, well, they missed out on watching any of Zushi's matches, but he's certain that Zushi is really skilled. And Gon even adds that Zushi could be just like them. Zushi, however, he says he's here to improve. And then he asks the boys which dojo do they belong to. He tells them that he's a practitioner of a martial arts style which is known as Shingeryu Kung Fu, which has been translated to mean style that originates from the heart. And the boys, they look at each other, they're confused. Dojo? What does that mean? What is he talking about? And then Killua tells Zushi that they don't belong to any dojo. They are quote-unquote independent. And this surprises Zushi, because having seen the boys in action, he thinks they must be self-taught warriors. So he's all chuffed about meeting them, and he's got some he's gained some respect for the boys. And soon after that, they are joined by a man who praises Zushi for having a good understanding of his lessons. This man who has just arrived, he's dark-haired, he's bespectacled, and despite Zushi calling him master, this man is just casually dressed compared to Zushi, who's in a karate gi. And this man is introduced as Wing. Again, he's Zushi's master. And he's surprised to find Gon and Killua, as young as they are, in Heaven's Arena. And so he asks the boys, why are they there? And Killua, he explains to Wing that they want to improve like Zushi and also earn some money because they don't have any money left. And then Gon, he tells Wing that Killua has been to Heaven's Arena before, and this confirms to Wing that both Gon and Killua are skilled enough since they've made it all the way to the 50th floor. So after that, the boys arrive at the reception window of the 50th floor, and it's there where, in exchange for the ticket stubs that they won after their matches, they receive prize money for winning their first matches. Each of the boys is given about 152 jenny, which is just enough for a can of juice. And Killua tells Gon and Zushi that fighters are given this prize money whether they are given a can of juice, whether they win or not on the first floor. But from the 50th floor onwards, a loss means no prize money. Yet a victory earns a fighter 50,000 jenny. And Killua adds that on the 100th floor, the prize is 1,000,000 jenny. And from the 150th floor going up, the prize is over 10 million jenny. All the prize money that Killua accumulated during the 4 years that he spent climbing the tower, he spent all that money on snacks. And yet he didn't even reach the 200th floor. He only got as far as the 190th floor, where he received a prize money of about 200 million jenny. All that money, can you imagine? He spent it on snacks. And for Gon and Zushi, it's beyond comprehension, because just hearing all those figures, that's enough, for them to just look at Killua and ask themselves, all that money that he accumulated, he spent it on snacks. Seriously. And so after that, after explaining to the boys about, his spending habits, he suggests that they should get one more match done for the day, since they got through their first matches unarmed. They're still fighting fit, so they might as well just get another match under their belt. They enter a locker room that is occupied by other fighters, and as you can imagine, they don't look too pleased about these three boys who have just walked in. And it's made even worse by Killua, because he's still talking and he makes it sound like they'll just breeze through that next match that he suggested they do. Meanwhile, you've got these veterans who are in the locker room, these giant muscular men, and they're not too happy about hearing Killua sounding so confident, despite not being just like them. And right afterwards, two fighters, this bald man named Maita and this long-haired man named Chibaba, they are announced for their match, which will take place on the 55th floor in Arena B. And then after that, another announcement is made for Killua and Zushi. Their match is set to take place on the 57th floor in Arena A. Now, upon hearing this, Zushi he's nervous now, because he's just met Killua and they've just started getting along, and now they have to face each other in a match. So he's now nervous, but at the same time he treats this as an honor to face Killua. But on the other hand, Killua, he just casually apologizes to Sushi, and he just explains to him that I'm planning to win, so sorry if I just win. And then he tells Gon, who is staying behind, that he'll meet him on the 60th floor. So we move to the 57th floor, Arena A. Full crowd is there, everyone is ready and waiting for the match between Killua and Zushi. Among the spectators, there's Wing in the crowd, and an announcer is there to introduce Killua and Zushi. And as she's making the introductions, there's a big screen in the arena which shows highlights of Killua and Zushi's previous matches. And it's from these highlights we get to see how Killua has disposed of his opponent, which is in the form of this swift chop to the back of the neck. And as for Zushi, on the other hand, he gets to display his martial arts skills. He's been able to, dispatch an opponent who's over 200, who's about 200 kg, able to dispatch him without any trouble. That's the boys so far. And then the announcer tells the crowd that now they can place their bets using these special wager devices that are available for the crowd. And once the bets have been made on the same screen, Zushi can see that he is the clear favorite to win this match. Killua is not too pleased about the results of this bet, but that's how it is. So the announcer then explains that the match is split into 3 rounds, which are 3 minutes each, and the winner will be determined by points or a knockout. And from there, the match begins, and immediately Zushi takes up a guarded stance, which Killua, he compliments him for, because there's not even an opening or a weakness in that stance. But he simply walks up to Zushi, and typical Killua, he's got his hands in his pocket, and at first Zushi is unsure how to respond to this. But for a moment he's stunned, but then he decides, okay, I'm just going to attack. So he tries to hit Killua with a straight right punch, but Killua disappears from in front of Zushi and reappears behind him and delivers that swift chop to the back of the neck. Zushi goes down. Zushi is going down. Killua apologizes to him, and he says he wants to make it to the 150th floor, and if it means making it to that floor with this one simple move, the chop to the back of the neck, so be it. So the referee who's there declares that Killua's strike is a clean hit, and the announcer goes on to explain that as far as the points are concerned, for a clean hit, a fighter will be awarded 1 point. A critical hit will be worth 2 points, and then a knockdown is worth 1 point. For Killua, he has earned 2 points for the clean hit and for knocking Zushi down. Once a fighter has earned 10 points, they win the match, or winning by knockout. The referee goes over to check on Zushi, while Killua is just standing off to the side watching this, and he's asking, what's the point of going to check on him? I've just delivered that swift chop to the back of the neck. There's no way he can come back from that one. But to his surprise, Zushi gets back on his feet, and the referee calls for the match to continue. So Killua now, he thinks that maybe he held back, so he decides to go for a second strike. Zushi though, he tries his punches again, but he can't land any of them on Killua, because Killua just dodges all of his punches, and once again reappears behind Zushi's back, delivers the chop. But before Zushi can go down and get counted out, the point before the point can be allocated by the referee, he gets back on his feet. And now Kilo was concerned. He wasn't expecting to see such resilience from Zushi, and he realizes that he cannot defeat Zushi if he continues using that same one-shot move. So Killua starts considering changing tactics. Meanwhile, Zushi is, speaking to himself now. He admits that he tried to fake Killua out, but that failed. So now he's thinking of trying something else. He's also going to switch tactics. So he takes up a different stance. One particular stance that startles Killua to the point where he backs away in retreat. Even the announcer is baffled by this, because Killua has gone in to attack Zushi so far. Why is he backing away all of a sudden? And as Zushi has taken up this stance, Wing from the crowd, he just stands up and shouts Zushi's name so loud to the point that everyone else in the arena is just caught off guard. They stop whatever they're doing. Zushi is pushed out of his stance. His concentration is broken. And right after that, Wing just calmly just sits back down, and the announcer now has to make out for the awkward pause in the action, and she just says, the match will resume once sorry for the interruption. The match will resume shortly afterwards. From there we move up to the 60th floor, where we see Gon is sitting in the lobby by himself until he sees Killua coming towards him. And he goes over to Killua and he shows him the 60,000 Jenny that he won for his match. And then he asks Killua, hey, what kept you? And Killua tells him that he had some trouble against Zushi. And Gon is wondering if is it because Zushi is that strong? But that's not the reason, because Killua doesn't see Zushi as an equal, despite the talent and the potential that he has. The actual reason is because Killua couldn't knock him out, no matter how many times he hit Zushi. And Killua, he also observed that the stance which Zushi switched to, it gave him the same strange vibes, same strange feelings that he gets when he fights his big brother Illumi. And Killua, he isn't sure what it is, but if it's some kind of technique, he thinks that there's something dangerous about it. Then he tells Gon that he heard Wing call it Ren. And this is after he overheard Wing and Zushi sometime after the match. And then we get a flashback to that point where Killua was walking in the lobby, and just over on the other side of a corner, this is where he sees Zushi and Wing speaking. And Zushi is apologizing to Wing for what he did. And Wing has to remind him that he told Zushi that the time had not yet come for him to use Ren. And Zushi, again, he apologizes to Wing and he says he really wanted to win. And Wing understands that Zushi wanted to win that badly. But he says Zushi's goal is much higher, than winning just one match. His goal is to reach the top of the tower. So he must not be impatient, or else that impatience will limit his growth. Which is why Zushi must get used to losing several matches while he's here in Heaven's Arena. And to this, Zushi, he agrees to this. And then we come back to the present, and Killua, he goes over what he overheard, and he tells Gon that his plans have changed. Now, Killua wants to reach the top of Heaven's Arena. And oddly enough, this just so happens to be the same goal that Gon has. So that's how we kick off this volume, and that's how we end chapter 45. So from this chapter, there's an extra page that is included, and it's on this page where Togashi gives a brief explanation of how he created Hunter x Hunter, from the name and what inspired him to come up with this series. So it was inspired by his hobby of collecting things. He collects a wide variety of odd objects, from old cards to books, boards, even, would you believe it, skeleton parts. He collects all of those. So he decided he wants to write a manga which would be titled Hunter initially, and would show different kinds of hunters. But for the title, Hunter x Hunter, this was inspired by an episode of a comedy show that he watched at some point, which is called Downtown. And there was one particular episode that he watched where someone had asked another person why they liked repeating words, why you say one word and he says that word twice. So from hearing this, funny enough, Togashi decided, I'm just going to give my manga the same title, Hunter x Hunter. So there you go. It's nothing fancy, nothing, just giant. It wasn't some major event that led to Hunter x Hunter. No, it was just an episode of this Downtown show, which happens to be a sketch comedy show. This I found out from, there was a fan translation of the French version of volume 6, and it included this little note about Downtown. It was a popular variety show in Japan. It was hosted by a pair of comedians named Hitoshi Matsumoto and Masatoshi Hamada, who would perform sketches on the show. I didn't get a chance to check maybe on YouTube if that particular episode is there, but after recording, if I get the chance, I'll head over to YouTube, check elsewhere and see if I can find that episode. And if I do find a video of it, something, I'll be sure to put a link to it in the show notes. So please be sure to have a look at those after this episode. So let's move on. We get into chapter 46, Nen. So Gon and Killua's win streaks, they continue. It's now 3 days later since they entered Heaven's Arena, and each of them, they've won their matches with a one-shot move. Killua, it's the single chop, and as for Gon, it's the same move that he used in chapter 44, which was the just pushing his opponent with one hand out of the ring. So at this point, they've each won 6 matches, and eventually they make it to the 100th floor. And for Gon, he is pretty pleased now, having his own room, a place where he can rest up and everything. And now he says they don't have to worry about money. But Killua's got some bad news for him. And he tells Gon that if they lose a match starting from this floor, they will have to give up their rooms. So they have to keep on winning, and at the same time, be alert for the other fighters, because many of them who have made it onto this floor, they have developed these tactics where even if they are not advancing, they still try and stay on this floor because they've got a benefit of having their own room. So they are desperate enough to try anything to stay on this floor. Just trying to survive. But as you'd expect, for Gon and Killua, dealing with those fighters, it's not a problem. So eventually they just continue winning more matches, and at some point they reach the reception window, and they are told that their prize money has been deposited into their accounts. And so Gon, as he's checking his account, he's shocked by the amount of money in his account. He's never seen that amount of money before. And Killua points out that just a week ago they were broke, and had to fight for money. But now all of a sudden they've got all this money, and he's surprised too, because the last time he was in the tower, it took him 2 months to reach the 150th floor. But Gon, it reminds him that, well, at the time Killua was 6 years old, so it shouldn't be a surprise that it took him that long to advance in the tower. And then they talk about Zushi, and they saw Zushi on TV, and Killua notes that he's still on the 50th floor, and Gon is curious about the subject that they talked about previously, that mysterious technique that they know as Ren, and he wants to know if what could Ren be, what could it be. And Killua thinks back to the fighting stance that Zushi took up in their match, and he says that if he and Gon could move up to the higher floors, there's a chance of encountering other fighters who might also use Ren. So then Gon suggests maybe they could just ask Zushi about Ren. So with that idea, they return to the 50th floor, they meet up with Zushi, and he tells them that Ren is one of the 4 principles or 4 exercises that form the basics of every martial art. First, you must learn Ten, then Zetsu, Ren, and finally Hatsu. This is how one trains for what is known as Nen. It's as simple as that. According to Zushi, he just explains it to the boys just like that. But to the boys, it's not that simple, because they didn't really understand anything from what Zushi explained. And this is when Wing shows up, pointing out that Zushi isn't exactly qualified to do any explaining or to teach anything about Nen, let alone Ren. And then Wing tells Killua that having half the knowledge about something is much worse than not having any of that knowledge at all. So Killua, he tells Wing that he's eager to learn about Nen, as it might shed some light on Illumi's powers. So he asks Wing if he could teach him and Gon. Although Killua, he tells Wing that he could just try and learn about Nen on his own, but he would prefer if Wing taught them, and he promises not to learn from anyone if Wing agrees to teach them. Wing agrees to teach them, and he tells the boys to meet him in his hotel room so that he can teach them. So then we move on to Wing's hotel room, and this is where Wing begins his explanation. What is referred to as Nen means flame, and is a power which inflames the soul or spirit by strengthening one's will. The 4 exercises which are necessary in order to strengthen one's will are as follows. There's Ten, which also means point, and it refers to focusing one's mind on something, for example, a goal, an intention, or objective, and you concentrate your spirit on that particular something. And then from there you have Zetsu, which has been translated to mean tongue or language, and it refers to speaking out or putting into words that goal or intention or objective. And the third principle is Ren, which means temper, and it refers to intensifying one's will. And then the fourth and final exercise is Hatsu, which can mean release or projection, and it refers to putting that goal, intention or objective into action. And then Wing points out that what scared Killua off during his match against Zushi, when Zushi took up that stance, that was Zushi's Ren and his unwillingness to lose the match. He was that determined to win the match. So now Wing wants to demonstrate what he's been talking about. So he starts off his demonstration by simply telling Killua that he's going to kill him, and he asks Killua if it's all right with him. And as you'd expect, the boys are confused by this, but for Killua, he just says it's okay. He's got no problem with that, because he doesn't believe that Wing will actually kill him. So then Wing proceeds. First there's 10. This is where he takes up a stance. And then Zetsu, which he says can be said out loud, or you can say it to yourself inward. Either way it works. And then this is where when he states his intention out loud, again, he's going to kill Killua. And this is when Wing's calm expression, his facial expression suddenly changes from being peaceful and calm into this menacing glare, which is backed up by a power that terrifies Killua and Gon, to the point where Gon's nerves have been triggered. And as for Killua, he's so frightened now that he leaps back and he crawls up into a corner of the room. And this is when Wing goes on to explain that what just happened, what he experienced, that was Ren. And if one's Ren or will is strong enough, even their Zetsu, or even their Hatsu, I should say, or their action can be just as strong, to the point where Ren can function just like Hatsu. For example, you can bluff your opponent with a simple battle cry if there's enough force behind it. However, relying too much on Ren can make one misjudge their actual skill, and they move away from their intended aim. So Wing, he says it's important that a person must have a developed spirit in order for their Ren to be effective. So in conclusion, Wing tells the boys that to learn about Nen, they must first begin by mastering 10, because doing so will protect them from the powerful auras of their enemies. And so after this, the boys, they leave the hotel room Gon thanks Wing for teaching them. And afterwards, Wing, he turns to Zushi and he instructs him to start his exercises, beginning with 10. Now, if you're reading the comic, you'll notice that the character that he uses this time for 10 is different from the character he used for 10 as he explained to Gon and Killua. Very interesting, something important to note about that. So we catch up with the boys. They're out on the streets now. And Killua says that Wing was not honest with them. He lied to them. And he tells Gon that while he can accept that the power which Wing displayed was real, he doesn't think Wing told them everything. For example, Wing didn't tell them about the source of Zushi's resilience. No matter what Killua did to him during that match, Zushi would not stay down. And it was until towards the end of the match when Killua got forceful and he struck Zushi quite hard. And this is where we flash back to the final stages of that particular match, where we see Killua delivering that forceful blow to Zushi, which was strong enough to send him all the way out of the fighting ring. Even the announcer, upon seeing this attack, she's certain that there's no way Zushi can recover from that blow. He might as well be sent to the hospital. And yet Zushi got back to his feet, and still, despite that, though, it was judged as a critical hit, and a point was given out because Zushi had been knocked down as well, and that point was enough to raise Killua's score to 11, and he won the match. So back to the present. Killua, he still couldn't believe that Zushi could stand up after that big blow which sent him out of the ring. And now he tells Gon he doesn't think that willpower alone could be the source of that resilience. There has to be something more to it. So now from there we go back to the hotel room. Zushi is still conducting his exercises while Wing, he's seated now reading a book. And then he notices that Zushi's 10 has been disturbed. And he asks Zushi, what's up with that? And Zushi, he stops his exercises and he says to Wing, he wants to know why his master didn't tell Gon and Killua about the proper 4 exercises. Could it be because they aren't Wing students? And Wing, he says, well, he didn't exactly mislead the boys, because what he told them about Nen, the inflaming of the soul or spirit, that's correct. He also adds that it's important. It's an important exercise which is necessary for one to learn about the true Nen, which means sense or mind force. However, Wing admits that he didn't teach them everything because they are not his students. But for the time being, they should try and master the Nen that he told them about. Because if proper Nen would be misused or abused, it could be a dangerous weapon. And then Wing demonstrates this by tearing a page from the book he's reading and then enforcing that page with some kind of energy. And then he throws the page at a can of juice that's on a table just near the far wall. It's on a table. And this page, it slices through a portion of that juice can and then lodges itself into the wall behind the table. And soon afterwards, the page loses that energy that it has been enforced with, and it goes limp. And then, there was some juice in that can, so it spills out of the can. And Wing goes on to explain that Nen is capable of, making a piece of paper as sharp as a blade, or making one's body as strong as steel and protect it from harm. And he says that anyone can learn Nen with enough effort, but you must be careful when choosing the people to teach about Nen. So Zushi understands this. But then on the other hand, he doesn't understand why Wing, he had to tear a page from a book that he hasn't read in order to strike a can that he had bought. And so Wing now has to apologize to Zushi for, spilling his can of juice. And then we reach the end of the chapter now, where some news comes out from the tower. It's about Gon and Killua making it to the 190th floor and winning their first matches on that floor. So that's the end of chapter 46. And we move on to an extra page, and this is where Togashi explains the origins of his other famous manga, Yu Yu Hakusho. So he says that during the early planning meetings with his editors, at that point he had a working title for the manga, which was called Yurei Ningen, or Phantom Men, or How to Be a Ghost. And he had some rough drafts as well. Fortunately, after the meeting, production for that manga was approved. So then he came up with another title for the manga, which would be Yuki, or Poltergeist Chronicles. And this would have been the initial title. But he was told that, at that point, there had been another manga which had begun publication, which had been titled Chin-Yuki, or Chronicles of the Bizarre. I found out a little bit about this particular manga. It ran from 1990 to 1992, and it was created by someone who went by the name Mangataro. I guess that was his pen name, or her pen name. And for this, the initial title, Yuyuki, the idea had been it was going to be a story which featured battles against demons. And so the inspiration for that title, Yuyuki, it had been a play on Sayuki, which is the name for Journey to the West. So after finding out that there had already been, another manga, Shinyuki, Togashi came up with Yu Yu Hakusho, which means poltergeist report. So he admits that he wouldn't have minded if the title had been the legend of, or the story of, but the moment Hakusho came to mind, that's the title he went with. So Yu Yu Hakusho is what we got in the end. So let's move on to chapter 47, The Invisible Wall. So in an elevator which is headed for the 200th floor now, Gon, he asks Killua what could they find on the 200th floor. But Killua doesn't know, of course, because he didn't get that far. And meanwhile, while the boys are in the elevator, we see Wing and Zushi. They are on another floor, and Wing finds out from Zushi that the boys are advancing, and Zushi is impressed by their progress. But as for Wing, he's wondering if maybe he might need to do some rethinking, having introduced the boys to the concept of Nen. He's now showing a little bit some second thoughts about that, because the boys are making so much progress in such a relative short space of time. So we get back to the boys. They arrive on the 200th floor, and there they see a corridor, but nobody is in that corridor. They look in that corridor, they look nervous, but they decide, okay, we're here now, so they might as well carry on. So they start walking into the corridor, and as they they're making progress in this corridor, things are not getting any better for them, because although it appears that they are the only ones in this corridor, Gon feels like they've entered a jungle which is packed with monsters. Despite that, Killua, he urges Gon and tells them, no, we just need to keep going. So they stop walking and they start running towards the other end of the corridor, until a powerful force stops them. And Gon, he can no longer move forward. He doesn't want to move forward. And this force is this strong killing intent which is aimed at the boys. And Killua, he calls out to whoever is targeting them from the end of the corridor, tells them to show themselves. And it's right after that, there's a woman who pokes her head into the corridor from one side at the end, and then she steps out, and she's dressed in the same uniform as the tower officials. And if you look at her face, she looks very tired, eyes are heavy, and she points to the other side of the corridor, from where she's standing just off to the side. And she identifies Gon and Killua and informs them that the direction she's pointing at, that's where the reception area is for the 200th floor. And they have to get there before midnight and register. And then we're shown a nearby screen which displays the current time, which is 8 p.m. And so this woman tells the boys that there are already 173 people who have registered and they're on standby. She adds also that use of weapons on this floor is permitted from this floor going up. So now the boys, they have just seen this woman appear at the end of the corridor, and Gon is wondering if maybe she's the source of this malicious energy that's targeting them. But Killua isn't sure. But the clerk, unaware of this, she just continues. And she says that from this point onwards, there will be no prize money that is issued. And instead, fighters will be competing for honor. And then the boys see someone's hand appear from the side of the corridor where the female clerk appeared. And this hand, much to the surprise of the boys, belongs to Hisoka, who shows himself at the end of the corridor. And Gon is asking him, why is he doing, what's he doing here? Why is he here? And Hisoka just tells him, well, the tower is the place to be for fighters. So, of course, he would be here. But most importantly, what is Gon and Killua? What are they doing here? And he goes on to answer that question. And it reveals that he's actually been waiting for the boys here. And it was easy to track them because they purchased their airship tickets online. And so after figuring out when they would arrive, Hisoka, he simply got to the airport ahead of them, and he followed them from there, knowing that they were headed to the Heavens Arena. Then he says, well, since he's their elder or their senpai, he's going to offer them some advice by telling them that now it's too early for the boys to be on this floor. And he motions with one hand for them to leave. Just this simple motion, the hand, there's enough force from it to push the boys back. And this woman, the female clerk, she's still there. She's just watching this go on without any idea of what's happening. The boys, though, having been pushed back, they just don't understand what's happening. Hisoka, he just sits down at the end of the corridor, and he raises his right hand forward and he tells the boys to come back some other time. Killua, he wants to protest, but Hisoka simply says that they cannot pass. And right then, Gon and Killua sense this immense pressure in front of them. And right then, Wing appears behind them, and he discourages the boys from trying to fight against that pressure, because doing so will simply lead to the boys killing themselves. And Killua, he just can't believe that they've been pushed back just by this force of Nen from Hisoka. This is the only thing that's keeping them from progressing. And so Wing, he admits that he wasn't completely honest with the boys, but he has a chance now to make up for it if the boys are willing to learn from him. The time, again, it's displayed. It's now 8:20. So Gon asks the female clerk what would happen if he and Killua failed to register on time. And the clerk, she says to Gon that Gon would have to start again from the first floor. But as for Killua, who didn't register when he was in the tower before, if he doesn't register this time, he will be barred from competing in any more matches. So the boys think this over. And then Killua asks Wing if they can make it back in time to register. And Wing says it all depends on him and Gon. So at 8:30, Wing and the boys, they are back in the hotel room, and we are shown a table which has a vase on it that has been pierced by the stems of a few flowers, and there's already water that is pooled right under the vase. And it's right after we get this display, Wing, he begins his explanation about Nen, the true Nen. And he says it's the ability to control life energy, which is known as aura, that is emitted from the body. Every person projects life energy, but the amount is so little that it flows out unnoticed and uncontrolled. The technique which allows a person to regulate that life energy, contain it in the body, and strengthen it enough to even slow down their aging, that's called Ten, which also means envelop. Then the next technique, which stops one's aura from leaking out, and allows the person to conceal their presence and recover from exhaustion. That is Zetsu, which also means suppress. Then comes the third technique, which enables a person to increase the amount of aura that they can produce. This is Ren, which also means refine or enhance. And then Wing, right after explaining that, he just stops talking. And yet Gon and Killua, they can sense something like a small pressure just coming from Wing. It's not a strange or a negative pressure, and Wing says it's because he has no intention of harming the boys. But at the same time, he's impressed by how the boys were able to notice even that little bit of pressure coming from him. He hasn't seen anything like this before, and he is certain that maybe it's because of the environments that Gon and Killua grew up in that is, it allowed them to, make a note of that pressure from him. So then he continues with his explanations, and he says that aura is a part of a person's existence. It can be used against other people in good ways or in bad ways. So, an aura which is full of malice, that is, can be powerful enough to kill a person who is defenseless, which is why one must protect themselves with Nen by using a form of Ten that can block an aura attack. And you do this by using your own aura. Then Wing moves on to a wall of the hotel room. He puts his right hand against the wall, and then right afterwards the cracks form on this wall. And he tells the boys that without that defensive aura, their bodies would be destroyed, like what has just happened to the wall. And from there we get to the end of the chapter, where we're back on the 200th floor, the end of the corridor. We see Hisoka still sitting there. He's playing cards against one of the walls. He has enforced these playing cards with some of his aura as he's throwing them against this wall, and he's saying, it's still too soon for the boys to come back to this floor. And after the chapter, we get one more extra page where Togashi, he explains about how he created his other manga, Level E. Maybe some of you have had the chance to read Level E. So here he explains that it wasn't Level E, though. It wasn't the first title for the manga. When he first received the approval to start Level E, he only had enough material for the first chapter. Initially, it was just going to be a story about aliens, and it would feature a different protagonist in each chapter. So at the time, the first title for the manga that he came up with was Alien Crisis. But then he was told that the title is a little too straightforward. So then he suggested Level E. But I think based on how he had pronounced it at the time, it might have been pronounced Level A. I'll explain a little bit why I say that. And this is inspired by a movie that he had rented around that time called Level 4. I have never heard of this movie. Maybe you've heard of it, Level 4. But I'll try and look up about it, and if I find anything, again, the link will be in the show notes. So the E in Level E, he had meant for it to stand for alien, you see, until Togashi's editor explained to him that the word alien is not spelled with an E but with an A, you see. So I suspect that the pronunciation of A, there might have had a hand in that. So I guess that's the reason why we didn't end up with Level A and Level E. It's because after he had been told that no, the spelling, it's an A, not an E, he decided to make a little excuse where he says, oh, he had been thinking of the word extraterrestrial instead, hence why he went for level E. And then he goes on to admit that, well, English is not that great. His English is not that great. So yeah, again, it's yet another unspectacular origin story about one of his manga. I guess, I don't know, maybe could have been more interesting, but there we are, level E. Could have been level A, but thank goodness. So let's move on to the next chapter. It's chapter 48, Hisoka's terms. So again, we're back in the hotel room. Wing is standing next to the damaged ball as he tells Gon and Killua that the reason for the damage to the wall, that's because of Nen. It is a power which exists in everyone, but only a few people in the world know about Nen and can use it, and which is why these people are identified as geniuses or superhumans or great masters, or are just simply called gifted. And then he goes on to explain that there are two ways that Nen can be awakened in a person, either by slowly unlocking it over a period of time or by forcefully triggering it. So Wing says that the first method is the one which he chose for Zushi, who also happens to be a quick learner, and he dedicated his time into putting in the effort to that first method. And so as a result, Zushi was able to master 10 in just 6 months. But for Killua, this is way too long because they need to learn about Nen before midnight, tonight. And at this point in time, it's nearly 9 p.m. So they have to master Nen quickly so that they can get through Hisoka's Nen barrier. So Wing proposes that they use the second method. And how quickly this goes will depend on Gon and Killua and how fast they can learn to contain the aura which is in their bodies. So first, he tells the boys that he will send his aura to them via the technique which is known as Hatsu, which also means release, which he demonstrated by damaging the wall. The boys, they look at the wall, but Wing assures them that he's not going to injure them like that. But then he warns that the second method it's a rough one because it involves using aura to awaken someone else's aura. And once that happens, the boys will have their power awakened, and then they can use 10. So by sending them his aura, Wing is aiming to forcefully open what's known as shoko, or aura nodes. And this is to allow the free flow of aura. Normally, a person opens these aura nodes over time through meditation after learning to sense their own aura. For Zushi, this process took him 3 months, while for Gon and Killua, Wing says it could take them 1 week or less. He admits that it's unfortunate that they have to resort to using the forceful awakening method, and Killua is a little puzzled by this and asks him why. Shouldn't it make more sense, to use the fastest method available, the faster the better? But Wing replies that that can work in some situations. However, if he was an inexperienced teacher or had any ill intentions towards the boys, he could kill them. But luckily for Gon, that's not the case as far as he can see. And even Wing, Killua, he wonders why Wing chose to help him out in the first place. So Wing reveals that it's because he saw that the boys are talented enough to reach the 200th floor without any proper training, and he thought that if they got there, they would be faced with problems. And it's because every fighter on the 200th floor can use Nen. And they tend to initiate or baptize new fighters who make it onto the floor with Nen. They use force, and they don't care if a person dies or not from this, this baptism. So, if a person should survive the baptism, though, they are allowed to stay on the 200th floor, and they are counted as one of the chosen. But it's those fighters in particular, the ones who have survived the baptism, they have taken a lot of damage, and it's something that Gon and Killua will see for themselves once they get onto the 200th floor. So Wing wants to prepare them in advance. That's why he's helping them. So he triggers his aura, and he's sure that the boys, they will also awaken their aura thanks to this second method, because of how gifted they are and the capability that they possess. So then he instructs them to remove their jackets and to turn around. And then Wing places his hands near their backs. And it's from this Gon, he senses this warm feeling that's strongly pushing against them, even without any direct contact from Wing. And to Killua, he knows that it's a sensation that's similar to Illumi's Nen, but without the malice that Illumi's Nen tends to have. And then Wing forces their aura nodes open, all their aura nodes, including those in their eyes. And this enables the boys to see their aura flowing out of their bodies. And to Gon, he likens it to steam coming out of a kettle. Killua, he sees so much aura that's flowing out. He's surprised by all this. But Wing cautions the boys. He tells them that if that aura continues flowing out this quickly, the boys will be left completely exhausted. So then he instructs them to focus on containing the aura by closing their eyes and standing in whatever position they are comfortable in. The boys immediately do this. And then Wing, he tells them to visualize the aura as a liquid flowing through their bodies from the top of their heads to their right shoulder, right hand, then down to their right leg and up to their left side. They should feel the flow of the aura until it gradually slows down and circles their core. And Wing is watching this happen in real time, and he's amazed, seeing the flow of the aura around the boys. It's being controlled now. It's being done in quick fashion because they found the best positions to stand in, to use 10 without any instruction. But at the same time, though, Wing is a little concerned about the amount of progress that the boys are making so far. Then he tells them to open their eyes, and he asks them, how do they feel now? And Gon, he says, he feels like he's in some kind of liquid, while Killua, he feels as if he's wearing some light clothing. And Wing says to them that they should remember that feeling and they should grow accustomed to it, because they will be able to use 10 even while they're asleep. So then he activates his aura again, and he wants the boys to be ready, because now Wing is going to channel some ill intent into his aura and project it towards them. So just from his stance alone, he says to them, it would have been enough to send both Gon and Killua out of the hotel room. And even Killua, he admits that he was a little worried about this. But Wing, he assures them that now, if they can withstand his malicious aura, this attack from him, they can handle the Nen barrier that Hisoka has set up on the 200th floor. So sometime afterwards, you see Gon and Killua return to the corridor. Hisoka is there, he's waiting, he sees the boys, and as soon as the boys use 10, Hisoka, he uses Ren. But the boys, they just proceed to walk through the malicious aura that has been released, and they make their way through, and they reach the end of the corridor. And from there, Hisoka, he welcomes the boys to the 200th floor, and he says they won't have to go through the initiation, the baptism now. So he's aware that Gon is in the tower mainly to fight him. And Gon, he says, well, since he's found Hisoka here, it saves him the time of finding Hisoka. But Hisoka, he tells Gon not to get too cocky, simply because he's mastered 10 now. Because there's so much more to Nen. That's how deep it is. And he demonstrates by using his own aura to form the card suit of spades between his fingers. And then for a brief moment, that spade changes into a skull. And from there, Hisoka, he starts walking away. And he says to Gon, he is still not good enough to face him. But if Gon can win at least one match on this floor, Hisoka might consider facing him. As Hisoka leaves Gon and Killua, they then find that 3 fighters have appeared in front of them. And these fighters, they are well aware that the boys are new arrivals on the floor. There's one fighter, he's hunched over, he's wearing a robe, also wearing a conical hat and a breathing mask that are all the same color. His upper body is supported by one metal prosthetic leg, and he's got a wooden cane as well. The second fighter is this tall man who's got an unusual face that looks as if he's wearing a mask. It's got slanted eyes, it's got spiky hair, and his left arm is missing. And then the last fighter, he's in a wheelchair. He's got spiky purple hair, and he's wearing some kind of headgear, light-colored headgear. And this is how we end chapter 48. The boys reaching the 200th floor, passing through the Nen barrier, and meeting these 3 fighters. So let's move on. Chapter 49. The battle begins. So it picks up where the previous chapter ended. Gon and Killua meeting those 3 fighters. The one in a wheelchair, he notes that the boys can use 10, and this is confirmed by the one-armed fighter. The time is now 10:37 p.m. and Gon, he tells Killua that they should get moving. So they hurry along, they get to the reception window, they're given the registration form to fill in, and then the clerk by the window asks the boys if they want to compete in a match. The boys, they don't understand. So the clerk explains that on this floor, fighters are given 90 days to prepare for a match. And during that period, they can call for a match at any time. A fighter, if they wanted, they could have one match every day, or one match on the last day of that 90-day period. Once they have competed in their first match, they are then given another 90 days. However, if they choose not to fight during that time, the fighter will lose their 200th floor registration. So Gon has made a note that, they can fight multiple times on this floor. The clerk confirms this, and she adds that 10 victories are required in order for a fighter to advance. But if they lose 4 matches before winning 10 times, they will be disqualified. So if they win 10 matches, they will then be in a position to challenge the floor master. A floor master is one of the 21 highest ranked fighters in the tower. Each floor master occupies a floor between the 230th and 250th floors. So if a fighter is able to defeat a floor master, then they become the new floor master. And then there's more. Becoming a floor master qualifies a fighter to take part in a special event that happens every 2 years on the top floor. This particular event is known as the Battle Olympia. So as you can imagine, the clerk is telling the boys about this, and she's got so much enthusiasm, so much excitement because it's a big deal. But the boys now, having found out what the whole point of reaching the tower is, they are now no longer interested in reaching the top of the tower. Even though the clerk also adds a bonus that, the champion of the Battle Olympia, they get to live in their own penthouse at the top of the tower. They receive a lot of treasure. The point where they live at the top of the tower, it's said to be the highest point in the world, 1,000 meters or 3,280 feet. But then there's a note that's included on the same page, which states that Killua, he lives in a house which above sea level is 3,700 meters or 12,000 feet. So really, it's not a big deal for him. And for Gon now, we know that he's mainly in the tower to face Hisoka. And so now that he knows what he needs to do in order for that fight to happen, he doesn't care about reaching the top of the tower now. So afterwards, those 3 fighters from earlier, they show up at the reception area while Gon is going through the registration form. The one-armed fighter, he tells Killua that they're just here to register, they're just here to request for a match. But to Killua, he is suspicious about these 3 fighters showing up now. And he tells Gon that he thinks that they're here to see when Gon will set his match date. But Gon, he just fills in the registration form. He doesn't care which day his match will be on. It's fine for him. And then he hands the registration form to the fighters. And they also set their matches on the form. And the one-armed fighter, he makes this little remark about Gon's confidence before the 3 fighters leave. But that's it now. They've set their dates, and then they leave. And then afterwards, the clerk, she gives the boys their room keys and tells them that they'll be notified when it's time for their matches. So as the boys are heading to their rooms, Killua, he makes a little comment about the appearances of those fighters, and he is certain that those 3 fighters were victims of the baptism, the initiation on this floor when they first arrived. And he wonders if had he and Gon arrived on this floor without any knowledge about Nen, would they have ended up like those 3 fighters? Maybe, maybe not, we don't know. So they make it to Gon's room first. It's this fancy looking room, it's well furnished and everything. And Killua actually, he spots a television set, and on the screen is displayed some information about Gon's match. It will take place on the 11th of March at 3 p.m. in the arena of the 225th floor. And it's upon reading this information that Killua was surprised by this, because that date, the 11th of March, is tomorrow's date. But despite this, Gon is not worried. In fact, he flares up his 10 and he tells Killua that although he doesn't think he'll win, he still plans to test out his 10 and find out how it feels. So from there we move on to the next day, and we get right to the arena. The crowd is there. The introductions are being made by the commentator, this young woman named Coco. And she tells the audience that this is Gon's debut match on a floor which is above the 200th floor. And his opponent is the robed fighter from the 3 fighters. and is introduced as a man named Gido, who has 4 wins and 1 loss so far. And then there's a brief flashback while these introductions are happening. We go back to the hotel room where Gon and Killua are training with Wing, and he tells the boys that 10 is mainly a defensive technique and doesn't increase offensive power, which is why the boys must rely on their own individual skills. And Wing warns them that if they encounter an opponent whose Nen is stronger, it's very possible for that opponent to seriously injure them or kill them, despite the boys using 10. So he suggests that they avoid competing in fights for at least 2 months. During this time, he will teach them as much as he can. But, well, we come back to the present, and Gon is moments away from a match. And, he just offers this silent apology to Wing, but Gon can't wait. He wants to try out what he's learned so far. As for Wing, he and Zushi, they are in a corridor elsewhere. They are watching this match on a monitor. Zushi is, he's just wishing Gon good luck. As for Wing, he just has this exasperated look now because, well, there's nothing he can do. Gon is moments away from competing in a match. Then the match gets started. Gon uses 10, and Gido, he tosses this small object into the air. It's a spinning top that he then balances on one finger as he tells Gon to consider himself lucky because Gido doesn't count himself as a super strong opponent for him. And then Gido follows up by balancing more spinning tops, and now there are 10 spinning tops. They are all lined up along his wooden cane, and all of these spinning tops are enveloped in his aura. And then Coco lets the audience know that those are Gido's dancing spinning tops, these powerful mobile weapons that can be launched at his opponents. And Gido proceeds to use a technique which is called Battle Waltz. And in this technique, all the spinning tops are sent flying, and they surround Gon, spinning at high speeds all around him, before colliding with each other as well. And then suddenly one of these spinning tops hits Gon in the back, and just as Gon realizes what has happened, the strike is declared a clean hit by the referee. And Gido tells Gon that the spinning tops can spin for hours with movements so unpredictable that even Gido doesn't know how they'll move. But Gon, as he takes in this information as he's recovering from that sudden attack, but he makes a note that just that one hit from one of those spinning tops had the same force as getting hit by a sledgehammer. That's how powerful these spinning tops are, and this fight has gotten underway. And we end chapter 49. We move on to chapter 50, Zetsu. So Gido's spinning tops continue to circle around Gon, and another spinning top hits Gon at the back. He's trying to keep his eyes on the tops, he's watching them, he's seeing them collide with each other at high speed. But then another spinning top hits him, and this time it hits Gon in the face, and it sends him flying backwards. That's a clean hit, and that's a knockdown. So Gido is awarded 2 points, and it raises his score to 4 now. The referee goes over to check on Gon. Gon gets back up, tells the referee he can continue. But deep down, Gon doesn't know what to do. He can't keep up with the tops because there are so many of them now, moving at these incredible speeds around him. Elsewhere, watching the match, Sushi asks Wing if Gido is using Nen. Wing confirms it, and he specifies that Gido is using a version of Hatsu to shroud his spinning tops with his aura. Nen can greatly increase an object's natural efficiency and power, and in Gido's case, his aura acts as a power source for the tops. The bigger the object, the more aura is required for it. And Wing adds that the objects which are the size of the spinning tops, for objects that are the size of the spinning tops, it's easy for Gido to keep them going for hours. But however, Wing suspects that Gido may have infused them with more Nen, which acts like a command for the spinning tops. And he says he's able to do this because Gido has a strong attachment to the spinning tops, which can further increase their abilities and improve their response to his commands. So we get back into the match. Gon, he realizes that he cannot follow the tops with his eyes only. He has to sense their presence instead. So he closes his eyes, aware that the tops are enforced with Nen. And Gon, he starts to sense their movement. But in doing this, where he concentrates on the movement of the spinning tops, he weakens his ten. And as a result, Gon, he pays for this when a spinning top, another one, hits him in the back, and it has enough force to send him all the way out of the fighting ring. And Koko goes on to announce that the score now is 6-0 in Gido's favor. So Gon, he understands that his previous idea won't work, because if he tries to focus on the spinning tops, he'll weaken his 10. Then he sees that one of the tops is outside the ring just like him, but it's not attacking him. The referee who's there, he checks on Gon, but Gon, he just tells the referee not to bother him, he needs to do some thinking. So now the ref, he gets annoyed by Gon, and he starts counting Gon out, saying that if Gon doesn't get back into the ring before the count of 10, Gon will lose the match. So as Gon is doing his thinking now, he notes that he doesn't sense any hostility from the spinning top which is outside. And then he wonders if the rest of the spinning tops are still in the ring. He checks, he sees that they are in the ring, and they are moving and spinning near Gido, still colliding with each other now and again. So then Gon asks himself if maybe they aren't targeting him. And then he turns to the referee and he asks him, hey, why aren't you in the ring as well? And the referee says, well, if I'm in the ring, I'll get attacked by the tops. And this gives Gon an idea now. He sees the point of the tops, how they behave, and he likens them to what's known as sumo spinning tops. Or if you want a more easy example, think of Beyblades. If you've at least heard of Beyblades, or if you watched the anime or read the manga, the same concept applies here. So Wing now, he comments right after Gon has made this note. Wing says that because the spinning tops are not living beings or machines, they cannot be given complex commands. So he thinks that Gido might have given them a simple instruction of push back any obstacles that are in the way, since all they do is just spin around the ring, and every now and again they collide with whatever they come into contact with. So for Gon, now that he understands that he does not have to worry about the spinning tops because they are not targeting him directly, he turns his attention on attacking Gido. So he gets back in the ring, he runs at Gido, and he jumps in the air ready to kick Gido. But Gido has seen through Gon's tactic and he starts spinning rapidly. And this technique he calls tornado top, that employs offense and defense. And Gon's attempted kick gets countered and he is sent right back out of the ring. It's another critical hit, it's a knockdown, so that's 3 points for Gido, and it raises the score to 9-0. Then he tells Gon that when he arrived on the 200th floor and got initiated that, he tells Gon that he arrived on the 200th floor and he got initiated. But since getting his current body, he has never lost. And it's because by spinning, like what he's doing through this tornado top technique, he protects himself while his spinning tops, they are the ones that do all the attacking for him. And this is how he gradually piles up all his points in a match. Then Killua, we see Killua, he's in the crowd watching this match, and he calls out to Gon and he suggests that he shouldn't attack Kido. Instead, he should just hold on and let Kido become dizzy after some time, since he's spinning so rapidly. But then next to Killua, there's this old man who's sitting, and he just laughs at Killua and he says, you're just another rookie giving out some rookie advice. And he tells Killua that training can negate such a problem for Kido. He doesn't have to worry about getting dizzy while spinning up so fast. And just as this old man is giving an example about figure skating, he gets punched by Killua for the unwanted advice. It's meant to be played out for laughs, because this old man just thought Killua is some rookie speaking out of turn. So we get back into the match. Gon is stuck again because he's unaware of what he can do next. And Wing, he makes another observation while watching the match. He says that theoretically there are several ways to solve the problem that Gon is facing now. He can either keep attacking Kido until he tires out or loses his 10, or he could try overpowering Kido's Hatsu with a much stronger Hatsu. But the problem is, whichever method Gon would use, it still requires him to produce a lot of aura. And at this point, Gon has not learned Ren yet. He would have to produce a lot of aura and turn it into a strong enough offensive force. And for that, plenty of training and fighting experience is needed. But Gon, as he is right now, has neither the training or fighting experience. And this fight, which is happening against Kido, in Wing's opinion, it's taking place 5 years too early for Gon. And Wing is sure that Gon is realizing that right now. And we get back into the match. Gon is trying to figure out what he can do right now, because he wants to keep on fighting. And he's well aware that there's 1 point remaining before the match is called off. And yet he still wants to continue. So then, to the surprise of Kido, Killua, and Wing, Gon closes his eyes and suddenly stops using 10. Wing is watching this, and he notices that that's not all. It's not the 10 that Gon has stopped using. No, Gon is now using Zetsu, which Wing hasn't taught him yet. And as a result, all of Gon's aura nodes are closed. Not a single hint of aura is leaking from him. And as a result, he is completely defenseless against Nen attacks. And Wing wonders now if perhaps Gon picked up Zetsu on his own before they even met. How is he using it now? And if that's the case, then maybe Gon might have learned it naturally without even knowing what Zetsu is. And Wing gives an example of a wild animal learning Zetsu naturally in order to hunt its prey. So Gon sees now why he sees now why Gon has so much potential if he is able to learn something like Zetsu so naturally. But he doesn't understand at the same time why Gon would use Zetsu now. In the crowd, Killua, he shouts to Gon, reminding him about what Wing had warned him about, leaving his body so defenseless against Nen attacks. But Gon is well aware of this, And he reasons that in order for him to feel the spinning tops, he has to focus all his senses on them. He can't just concentrate on his 10 now. So Wing realizes that Gon has no intention of winning the match. And this baffles him because Gon is willing to risk his own life in such a match just to get some practice done. But as for Guido, he's watching Gon and he just laughs at him, thinking that this is a suicide mission. He wants to get himself killed. He has no problem with that. So the spinning tops, they continue to move at high speeds now, getting closer to Gon until Gon instinctively avoids getting hit by one of the spinning tops. He just moves his head to the side and the spinning tops just flies past. And Guido can't believe this. Commentator Koko can't believe this. The crowd, they're amazed by this. And Gon now, he can sense the spinning tops and follow their movements. So he decides to focus on dodging the spinning tops, because for Gon, this is how he can fight. This is how he can continue in this fight. And one of the spectators who's watching this match, this spectator is watching from the back of the arena. This is Hisoka. And the chapter ends with Hisoka just smirking and clenching his fists as he watches this match. And so now, at least he's interested now, it seems. So let's move on to chapter 51:10. It's the day after the match between Gon and Guido. And the first person we see is Killua. And he is listing the major injuries that Gon sustained during that match. So let's have a look at these now. Broken radius of the right arm and ulna. Now a radius is the outer and slightly shorter bone of the two bones for forearm, while the ulna is the inner and longer bone. Cracked humerus. This is the bone which extends from the shoulder to the elbow. 3 rib fractures and 12 ribs which are cracked. It will take Gon 4 months to completely heal up. And Gon, we see him, he's sitting up in bed, his right arm is in a sling, he's got some scratches and bandages, but the only thing he does is just apologize to Killua, just a casual apology. But Killua is not having it. He just gets more annoyed with Gon, wanting to know what was Gon thinking. What was the point of what he did in that match? Look at him now. And he reminds Gon about the appearances of the 3 fighters, Guido and the other 2 fighters. And he reminds him now that if Gon had continued fighting, he could have ended up just like those 3 fighters. This is why Wing warned them. But Gon, again, he is just taking this in stride. And he says even though he just got hit a couple of times, he reasons that it wouldn't have been enough to kill him. So, it's all good. He's alive. He's fine. And then, after that, there's a knock at the door. And Killua, he goes on to answer the door. And it's Wing who has arrived. He enters and he walks over to Gon, who starts apologizing. And Wing, he slaps Gon before he can finish apologizing. Yeah, he doesn't want an apology. He's just as upset with Gon as Killua is, and he scolds Gon for his actions, just like Killua has just done. And then afterwards, Wing, he calms down because he's glad that the injuries are not worse than they are. And Gon, he gets to finish his apology, but it's not enough for Wing. The apology is not enough. He turns to Killua and he asks about the recovery period. And Killua, he instead tells Wing that it's 2 months for Gon to completely heal up. And then Wing turns back to Gon, unaware that Killua didn't tell him the truth. And he says that Gon is denied from competing in any more matches for 2 months. And if Gon disobeys this, then Wing won't teach him about Nen anymore. So Gon, he promises to obey the instruction, and he won't compete in any matches. And he also thanks Killua silently for covering up for him. Then Gon, he's asked by Wing to give him his left hand, and it's on the little finger of the left hand that Wing ties this small string, which will serve to remind Gon of his promise. And then afterwards, Wing, he says he wants to speak to Killua alone. So they step out and they're in the lobby of that floor. And Wing, he asks Killua what's his true objective for being here in Heaven's arena. So Killua admits that at first he and Gon came to the tower mainly to earn some money. But after meeting Zushi and Wing, well, this was before they met Zushi and Wing. They were just here to earn some money. And so now he understands that for many fighters on the 200th floor, the goal is to reach the top of the tower and compete in the Battle Olympia. But that doesn't interest Killua now, although he's not too sure about Gon, because on one hand, Gon's main focus is to fight against Hisoka, but on the other hand, Killua remembers the match from yesterday, and it looked as if Gon was really enjoying himself in that match. And we flash back to that match, and we pick up from where things left off in that match, where Gon had closed his eyes and was not having any problems from Kido's spinning tops. He's just been dodging the spinning tops. And Coco, again, stunned by what is just what's been going on. She's wondering how long this can keep going, because there are now 50 spinning tops in the ring now, and Gon has managed to dodge these spinning tops for an hour at this point. Kido, speechless, all he can do is watch Gon dodging the spinning tops, and there's nothing that he can do because all the spinning tops are now in the ring. And Killua, from the crowd, he warns Gon not to go in one particular direction, but it's too late. And Gon, at this point, he gets surrounded by all those spinning tops, and eventually one of those tops rams into his right arm. We come back to the present time, and when he's having just heard from Killua, he's surprised to hear that Gon was having fun in that match despite his life being on the line. Killua says, well, he can relate because he is like that at times. But the difference between him and Gon is that Killua chooses his opponents. He also chooses the time and place. While Gon, when he gets really interested in something, any thoughts, any thinking, he sets that aside. But Killua is quick to assure Wing that Gon won't break his promise. Yet, Wing is silently, he's quietly worrying about his actions, having introduced the boys to Nen. But then Killua tells him, well, it's too late to worry now, because Nen is something that he and Gon are well aware of now. If Wing decides to quit teaching them, well, the boys will either find someone else to teach them, or they'll teach themselves, because with people like Hisoka and Illumi who are out there and who can use Nen, it would be eventually he and Gon would have found out about Nen. So Wing shouldn't feel too badly about teaching them. So after hearing this, Wing decides, okay, he's not going to quit teaching them, because there's still a lot that he can teach them. He tells Killua that Zushi is waiting back at the hotel, and he suggests that Killua train with him. But Killua declines because he doesn't want to get ahead of Gon. So you instead choose to train alongside Gon after he has kept his promise. So as Killua is leaving Wing, gives him some instructions for him and Gon, and he says that they can practice the original version of Nen that he told them about, the one where you inflame one spirit or soul. They can practice that, and daily they should exercise 10. So Killua returns to the room and he finds Gon already exercising, and so he just sits next to the bed and he joins in. So while the exercise is going on, Gon, we see he's remembering what Aunt Mito told him about his father, Jin, telling him that no, Jin didn't abandon him. And also Gon, he remembers Kaito telling him about what an incredible hunter Jin is, and expressing how difficult this final trial that Kaito was on, where he was in search of Jin, expressing that this particular trial is the biggest challenge that he has ever had. And from there, Gon is seeing several images in his mind. The image of him when you are speaking to Kaito all those years ago. He sees Hisoka's face, the photograph of Jin, the moment where Gon left behind his friend Kon with the rest of his forest friends, the day he left Whale Island, and also someone calls out Gon's name. All this is going on in his mind while he's exercising in silence. And then we get this shot, this image of Gon and Killua continuing their exercises. Then, towards the end of the chapter, we go elsewhere to an unidentified city where we finally catch up with Kurapika, who has arrived at a certain agency. And there he is met by an agent, this woman, this purple-haired woman who's got multiple piercings and tattoos. She's impressed by Kurapika having found this particular place, but unfortunately she cannot introduce Kurapika to any of their clients. It's not because he's lacking in experience, it's because despite his experience, he is still less than a rookie. Shockingly. So Kurapika doesn't understand. He reminds this woman that he has already shown her his hunter license. But she tells him that the exam is not over yet, and she can tell just by looking at him. And then she asks him if he can see what's next to her. The woman is surrounded by her aura, and there's a skull which forms just next to her. But when Kurapika looks at the woman, he only sees the woman. He cannot see her aura, he cannot see that skull, can't see anything. So she tells him that when he can see what's next to her, he should come back, because being able to see the aura, it's the minimum requirement for him to be accepted. So we go back to the hotel. Zushi is training while Wing is deep in thought now. He's asking, thinking maybe he's having second thoughts about having exposed the boys to the concept of Nen, and he's wondering if maybe he has awakened a monster, after seeing Gon in action and what happened. But Zushi, he pauses his training to check on Wing, and he's asking if is everything all right. But the chapter just ends with this shot of Wing's face as he flares up his aura, because on one hand, although he looks anxious, he also looks a little bit excited about maybe the prospect of what has just happened, what's going on. So that's the end of chapter 51. So we move on to chapter 52, Castro. So Killua, we see him, he arrives in Gon's room, and to his amazement, he finds Gon is doing a handstand. And then he says, he was just about to pay Killua a visit. And then, Killua, again, shocked to see Gon is already this active. The last time we saw Gon, his hand was in a sling, but here he is, he's up, he's active, he's jumping around, he's jogging in place, and he's telling Killua that, he feels better now. And to Killua, this is incredible because although Gon is claiming to be recovered now, this is 1 month later, and yet he sustained injuries which would normally require 4 months to fully recover. But both of these boys are freaks of nature, so I guess we shouldn't be surprised. So then Gon, he asks Killua, why is he here? And Killua shows him a pair of tickets. It's not just any ordinary tickets, they are tickets for Hisoka's match. And this immediately gets Gon's attention. And Killua says, he was able to get them because the boys are fighters on the 200th floor. Although they did cost him a pretty penny, but he got them anyway. So now from there, we see the boys, they are now walking through the streets, and Killua explains that Hisoka's matches are very popular. There was even a long queue of people going to buy tickets, even on the black market. These tickets were available, and they were, in high demand. So Killua would ask around, and he learned that Hisoka has competed in 11 matches so far, with 8 wins, 3 losses, and 6 knockouts. And those knockouts are the number of fighters that Hisoka has killed. So Gon, again, he's listening, he remains quiet. So Killua continues, and he says that those 3 losses that Hisoka has got were a result of Hisoka not being present for those 3 fights. And Killua thinks that maybe Hisoka registers for matches on the last day of the 90-day period, but doesn't show up for them. And yet, when he does show up for a particular fight, he does not lose. And also, it turns out that in those 4 matches, in those 11 matches, Hisoka has only had 4 points which were awarded to his opponents. 1 was for a knockdown, and the three other points were for clean hits. And Gon, although he sounds a little concerned after hearing this, Killua is not convinced that Gon is actually concerned. If anything, he's certain that Gon is actually excited upon hearing about all this, because the expression on his face is completely opposite from the little comment of concern that Gon gives out. Killua reveals that there's a fighter named Castro. He is the one who's got those 4 points that were awarded to him during his fight against Hisoka. And that's the opponent that Hisoka is going to be facing in this upcoming match. And this particular match is a big one because both of them agreed on the date for it. And Killua, he sees it as an opportunity for him and Gon to observe Hisoka in action and maybe learn his techniques. But then Gon reminds Killua about his promise to win, although Killua doesn't think that watching the match will affect the promise. And speak of the devil, this is when Wing appears, and the first thing he does is flat out refuses for Gon to watch the match because it would still count as studying Nen. So he tells Gon that he still has 1 month of healing left, so he should make the most of that time. And then, just as quickly as he appeared, Wing is gone. He's gone. But as he's walking away, he makes a little note that the boys have been following his instructions. They've been exercising 10 every day, And this is confirmed by how their aura is flowing from their bodies now. And Wing likens it to a river, a great river, which is great but calm. So he's glad to see the progress that the boys have made. So afterwards, Killua, he tells Gon that they can watch a tape recording of the match later. But Gon, he might not be able to watch the match live, but Killua, he's certainly going to watch it. So he's going to watch it in person. Although he does start grumbling about the money that he spent, getting these tickets. One ticket cost him 150 jenny, which he could have spent on buying chocolates, as you'd expect from Killua. So Gon, although unable to watch the match, he goes back to his room. The TV is on, he switches it off, and he takes a look at the string which is tied to his the finger of his left hand, to remind him of the promise that he made to Wing. Then he sits on the bed and he starts trying to do his 10 exercise. But it doesn't take long before he just can't get into the exercise. He's shaking now with excitement after what he had been told about Hisoka from Killua. He just can't contain that excitement. So from there we move to the arena where the match between Hisoka and Castro is going to take place. The crowds are already there waiting for the match, and this is an hour before the match even begins. The announcer who is there, she gives a little breakdown of the two fighters that are about to fight. There's Hisoka, the Grim Reaper magician, with his record of 8 wins and 3 losses. He's taking on Castro, who has got a record of 9 wins and 1 loss. Those 9 wins happened after his loss to Hisoka. And so now Castro is 1 win away from qualifying to face a floor master. We see Killua, he's walking through one area in the tower, and then he sees one particular monitor which is showing footage of an interview that Castro did. And this is when Killua gets to see what Castro looks like for the first time. And at first he thought Castro would be this big giant of a man, but instead Castro is this handsome man with long hair and dark eyes, and he's telling the interviewer that he wouldn't fight if he didn't see any chance of him winning. This particular fight is aiming to show Hisoka how much he has grown in experience in the 2 years since they had their previous encounter. And so Killua now, after seeing Castro, this interview, he thinks, Castro is very confident in himself. But now he needs to put this confidence to the test. So what Killua ends up doing is he makes his way to the floor where Castro's room is located. He's able to pass an official, get past him by distracting him, and then he reaches the door to Castro's room, which is slightly open. And Killua gets to look inside, and he sees Castro is seated in a chair, looking off to the side. So just as Killua is about to enter the room, Castro appears behind Killua and asks Killua if he can help him. And Killua, he stops what he's doing because he was certain he saw Castro seated in the chair just ahead of him, just now. But when Killua looks in the room, the chair is empty. And he wonders if Castro, did he move fast enough to be able to leave the room and appear behind him without Killua noticing? That can't be possible, because Killua only took his eyes off of the door when he heard Castro's voice. There's no way that he could have moved that fast. So now Killua, he turns around to face Castro, and he just tells him, I'm just here to get an autograph. And so to this, Castro he feels honored. But what shocks Killua is that Castro is able to identify him by name, and he even asks about Gon. And so Castro, he says that he's well aware of his potential rivals who are on the 200th floor, and he tells this is the reason why he was able to identify Killua and Gon by name. So then Killua tells him that the actual reason why he's here, he had come out to scope Castro and test out his skill, and he admits that he is impressed by what he has seen so far. And so Castro, he also commends Killua for his setsu, but he advises him that if he didn't want his presence known, he should have hidden it before arriving on this floor, because anyone would be cautious if they noticed a presence like Killua's suddenly disappearing, to the point that from the moment Killua stepped out of the elevator, Castro had detected him. He knew that he was here. So then Killua asks him, okay, how did you do it? But Castro, he declines to tell him, because he is certain that there's a chance they might fight each other at some point. But Killua reminds him, he tells him that he's not planning to advance in the tower. Although to Castro, Killua's aura tells him otherwise. And he just laughs at this, and he recommends that Killua, if he wants to know, he should watch his match and find out for himself. As for the autograph that Killua had mentioned, that's out of the window now, because Killua didn't bring any pen and paper. But Castro, he didn't catch what Killua said about not advancing in the tower. So to him, he still thinks that Killua might still be interested in advancing in the tower and getting to the Battle Olympia. So he says to Killua, he'll wait for him at the Battle Olympia, and closes the door to his room. So from there, we move on to the match. It's time. Hisoka, Castro, they're standing in the ring facing each other with the crowd waiting in anticipation. And Castro, he thanks him for the initiation, because that motivated him to become stronger. And Hisoka, he just laughs at this, and he asks him, who exactly got stronger? As for Killua, he's in the crowd watching the match. Then Castro tells Hisoka that he didn't fight seriously during those 9 matches that he won after losing to Hisoka, because those matches were just for training in order for Castro to get ready to defeat Hisoka now. And so the match begins. We see Castro, he jumps forward, he shrouds his right hand in aura, and just as Hisoka ducks to avoid the hand, Castro's hit still connects with Hisoka, and is declared a clean hit. And Hisoka is a little surprised by this, because he is certain he dodged Castro moments ago. And Castro is there, he just wants Hisoka to get serious. The match has started now, but this is where chapter 52 comes to an end. Let's get into chapter 3 now. Chapter 53. Double. So Hisoka, right after getting struck by Castro, he's still on the ring floor crouched. But now, his left cheek is bruised. And as Castro is telling him to get serious and not hold back, because Castro is no longer the same as he was 2 years ago. He warns Hisoka now that he won't go easy on him with his next strike. The commentator who is there informs the stunned audience that Castro has earned the first point of the match. Thinking that maybe Hisoka just was not fast enough to dodge that attack. even though, again, Hisoka was certain that he dodged the attack. Yes, for even Kilo watching this, he's stunned as well, wondering if maybe what he saw was an illusion, maybe. So then Hisoka gets back on his feet, and he says to Castro that he'll decide when to become serious. And just then, Castro goes on the attack again, urging Hisoka to make that decision quickly. He appears in front of Hisoka, aiming to swipe him with his left hand. Hisoka ducks, only to see Castro's left hand still headed towards him, and the attack lands. Again, Hisoka, certain that he avoided the attack, and yet he's been hit a second time. But this time, he saves himself from falling onto the ring floor by using his right hand to balance and avoiding Castro's next attack. For the third attack, Castro comes in with a flying kick. Hisoka blocks it with his left arm, but Castro suddenly appears behind him and lands another kick on Hisoka's right cheek. And this is a clean hit and a knockdown. Even the commentator can't hide her disbelief as she brings up the score, which is now 4-0 to in Castro's favor. And then now Castro takes up a fighting stance as he asks Hisoka now if he hasn't changed his mind about taking him seriously. And he adds that if Hisoka continues like this, he will die without understanding what is happening. And the referee is there trying to do his job, checking on Hisoka, who is still lying on the floor of the ring. But the only thing that he does is just smirks when he's asked if he can continue. And he gets back up and he tells Castro that he thought he saw him vanish. Something that at this point is even agreed with by the commentator. And then Hisoka gives another thought, and he says he clearly saw Castro in front of him before he appeared behind him. But Hisoka just can't quite figure out what happened exactly. And then Castro, he tells him that he's wasting his time trying to work it out, as long as he chooses not to take Castro seriously. But Castro is not going to wait for him anymore. He flares up his aura and surrounds himself with that aura, and that fighting stance that he took up, it's recognized by the crowd, and this is a signal for Kokoken or Tiger Bite Fist, and even Killua knows of it. It's a martial arts technique that is highlighted by one's hands imitating the fangs and claws of a tiger, and even experts of this technique can tear through entire trees with it. And Killua, though, he still hasn't figured out what Castro's true ability is, and he knows that even Hisoka hasn't figured it out either, which could mean now that Hisoka is certainly going to be killed at this point now. So then Castro, he charges at Hisoka, who just stands where he is, watching Castro approach. And then, for some reason, Hisoka, he extends his left arm out and he tells Castro that, he can have it. But Castro, he thinks maybe this is some kind of trap. So, but he proceeds to attack anyway. And he vanishes from that spot, and he reappears behind Hisoka. And instead of going for the left arm, he attacks Hisoka's right arm and he rips it off. And the crowds, much to the shock of the shocked crowd, they watch Hisoka's forearm, flying through the air, while Castro tells Hisoka that he's making a big mistake if he thinks that things are going his way. And yet Hisoka, he just calmly says that this is going along with his expectations, despite his right forearm having just been ripped off. So he steps away from Castro. He catches the forearm and he says, he's figured out what Castro's ability is. I guess this explains why Hisoka is just calm, and he says Castro's ability is the ability to create a double. The crowd, they're puzzled by this, but Castro, he confirms what Hisoka has said by revealing a copy of himself, much to the shock of the crowd and Killua. And Killua now, he understands what he just saw earlier, that it wasn't an illusion, but it just looked as if Castro had superimposed another physical form of himself on himself. So Hisoka, now seeing this physical double of Castro, he asks if the copy is what's commonly known as a doppelganger. Castro confirms that it is, and what we get now is an explanation of a doppelganger. This is from the first version of this chapter. Doppelganger, German for double walker, a double of a living person. This term is generally used in reference to the apparition seen by the owner of the doppelganger himself. One characteristic is that the person in question reports feeling fatigue or a headache, which goes away once the doppelganger vanishes. From this, it is surmised that it siphons off some kind of energy from its owner. There are cases of doppelgangers being witnessed by dozens of people who knew the person well, and others where the doppelganger gave its owner advice or a warning. There is even a record of a doppelganger that stabbed another woman. That's the explanation. And the source which is linked to this is a book which is titled The Encyclopedia of the Paranormal, The Complete Guide to the Unexplained, which is authored by Lynn Pickett. It's an actual book, just so you know. So I'll be sure to put a link to this if anyone is interested in checking it out. Please check the show notes. As well as there were some other books that I found by Lynn Pickett, in particular that have to do with the Knights Templar, Jesus Christ, Mary Magdalene, Leonardo da Vinci. So there's quite a lot to dive into there. So please check the show notes. You'll find links to those. So back to the match. Hisoka tells Castro that he followed his advice and faced him, as in started to take him seriously. But also at the same time, he was observing Castro while doing so. And Hisoka saw, and this is what he observed, that he saw Castro disappear right in front of him, but he still felt Castro's energy near him. So to this, Hisoka adds that the energy seemed to increase right before Castro vanished, as if he had multiplied. And to Castro, he's impressed by Hisoka's observation, and he explains that through Nen, he has succeeded in creating a double of himself, a double that he sends forward to attack his opponents, while Castro targets them from their blind spots when they engage the double. And to this, Killua, he notes that, because of Castro's light clothing, he's able to create, more blind spots for his opponents, making it difficult even for professionals to figure out what their ability is. And then Castro continues, and he says that the double is a physical copy. It's not an illusion, meaning that while it is present for Hisoka, he is facing two Castros.